last few years for Jets fans, I feel like, have just been the craziest, weirdest, random roller coaster of a seasons we've seen, I feel like, in a long time. And this is even going to back once the team relocated, and we really didn't have an identity at all. We were just the Atlanta Thrashers, now located in the Winnipeg. And this year and last year as well kind of feel the same in a way. Just this year, maybe a little bit more salt in the wound, I feel like, because I finally fully accepted that this team was stuck in mediocrity. And again, this is just my take on everything, but that's just how I view things currently. And I wanted to kind of do a season recap of everything that happened in the last 56 games, talk about it, talk about my thoughts, my disappointments, what I thought was good, what I thought was bad, and all that things in between, and just get it all out there because the playoffs start tomorrow, obviously, and I want to kind of have a fresh slate because although I don't have a lot of faith in this team, don't get me wrong, they're still my team, I still believe in them, and I still want to see them try to succeed at least, so I want to try to clear the slate, clear my, all these negative thoughts I have with this team right now, all my complaints and gripes with them, and kind of go into tomorrow's matchup and kind of be given more of an empty, clearer mind and be ready for something new, kind of this game one of a new season, if you would. And with all that being said, I wanted to talk about kind of all my ups and downs I thought were with this season, what really happened that worked and what didn't work and all that. So if you are new to this channel and you're a fan of the Winnipeg Jets, or more importantly, a fan of hockey regards to the team you root for, definitely consider dropping a subscription, as I'm going to take you through my thoughts, all my, wonderful theories, if you would, about why the Jets weren't good in some areas, why they were good in others, the good, the bad, and everything in between that happened in the 2021-2021 NHL shortened COVID season for the Winnipeg Jets. So with all that being said, without any further ado, let's jump into my first real talking point, and that is just breaking down the basic, bare bone stats for offensive stats and defensive stats. So for goals scored, we were 12th in the NHL with 3.04 goals scored a game. Our shots on goal percentage was shots on goal in a game, were 17th with 29.7 shots on goal per game. Our power plays percentage was 7th in the NHL with 23%. Our shooting percentage was at 10th, tied for 10th in the NHL with 10.2%, and our face-off percentage was 13th in the NHL at 50.5. Now jumping over to the defensive stats, our defensive stats were for goals allowed 10th in the NHL with 2.71, shots on goal allowed 20th with 30.6, our penalty kill percentage being 13th in the NHL at 80.5, and our penalty minutes per game 9th in the NHL at 7.2, and we finished the record finished this regular season, with a record of 30, 23, and 3. Now, when we look at that and we think about this entire season as a whole, I think it's very obvious to see how this team succeeded, where they were able to get their wins from, and where they didn't get their wins from, and that is obviously offensively. When you look at some of these offensive basic stats, you can already see bare bone stats prove what all of us Jets fans know, that this offense carries this team to success, along with the back of Connor Hellebuyck, night in, night out, bailing this team out at times and making their defense look much more competent than they actually are. And that is something that this team has just had for a long time going for itself, ever since Connor Hellebuyck really blossomed into his own way back when in 2017-18, and even prior to before that, and kind of just started to really build up his momentum as a starting goaltender and a starting caliber goaltender in the NHL. Now we know where he's at. We know he's a Vezina winner. We know how good he is, along with our offense, how good they are, how elite they are. We know that they're going to generate scoring. And when we look at these defensive stats, we can see where some of the problems start. Shot on goals allowed, 20th in the NHL with 30. That's something you don't want to really have that high. Again, you want to limit danger opportunities against your goaltender as much as you can. So allowing 30 shots a night can be pretty bad, especially when you're being outshot at times prior to what you're allowing. And if you notice anything, especially in that last 15 to 20 games of the Winnipeg Jets regular season, they were outshot a lot of the time, sometimes in the first period way more than the others, and at the end of the game when we even out. But there were times where the Jets severely get outshot, and that is just something to do with the way the defense moves the puck, the way the offense contributes, and how they shoot and when they choose. And I've talked about that in my podcast a lot, but I think when you just look at the bare bones stats for any fan can look at and kind of get an idea of what their team was good at and what their team wasn't good at. When you look at the Jets, it's very obvious the Jets were good at being a forwards group that could score, at having a defensive core that was stable at times, carried by good goaltending that kind of kept them in the float at times up until obviously that last 15 games of the season roughly, where everything really fell apart for the Winnipeg Jets. Now, jumping over to looking at the individual stats and performances, I want to also just keep it to the minimum. I don't want to go too in-depth just yet. I want to kind of cover the top 10 in scoring on this team for points. And in that order from 1st to 10, we have Mark Scheifele coming in 56 games played, 21 goals, 42 assists, for 63 points. Kyle Connor, 56 games played, 26 goals, 24 assists for 50 points. Nikolai Ehlers, 47 games played, 21 goals, 25 assists for 46 points. Blake Wheeler, 50 games played, 15 goals, 31 assists, 46 points. Andrew Kopp, 55 games played, 15 goals, 24 assists, 39 points. Neil Pionk, 54 games played, 3 goals, 29 assists, 32 points. Paul Stastny, 56 games played, 13 goals, 16 assists for 29 points. Mason Appleton in 56 games, 12 goals, 13 assists for 25 points. Adam Lowry in 52 games, 10 goals, 14 assists for 24 points. And Josh Morrissey finishing the year with 56 games played, 4 goals, 17 assists for 21 points on the season. And when you look at that, you kind of get to see some robust scoring, if you would. Seeing a lot of guys in the third line being in the top 10 in scoring, I think is a very good stat to see, obviously, because you want to have not the top 9, I like to say, that can score goals. If you're going to load up a fourth line and have them even be younger with speed and want to be more defensive, kind of just keep the pressure on but not expect a lot from goals, you want to have more goals being scored, obviously, in those top 9 of your forward core. And the Jets had a lot of that this year and had a lot of success with that. Obviously, Andrew Kopp having a career year in points, Adam Lowry coming in and having a much improved year from last year, obviously, and Mason Appleton as well having a career year of 25 points, 12 goals nonetheless. So a really good year for him. A really good year for just bottom 6 scoring in general. We had a lot of that. We've always had that, even going back to Armia, Tanev. We've always had good guys that can score in that bottom 6 role. Tanev, maybe not so much as a rookie, but he eventually got to that level where he could be more of an offensive threat. And I think it's something that the Jets have just been able to do extremely well over the last few years, developing that bottom 6 talent, that young talent to come in and be effective. Because as we can see now, a guy like Mason Appleton, who was a very late round draft pick, coming in, being an amazing player on the Moose, contributing well, being a great AHL level player, being developed through the Jets slowly and the way that they want to do it for bottom 6 guys, and now being a guy that can get you 25 points in 56 games on a third line, playing everywhere in your lineup at times, really. So it's really good to see, and I like this. Not to mention the fact, honorable mention to Matthew Perreault, who just missed out on this being in the top 10. He had a really, really good year, a kind of a bounce back year from the last few years of decline we've seen from him. So good for him to have a good bounce back year going into his free agency. Who knows? Maybe he'll sign with the team on a reduced salary, or maybe he'll go out somewhere and get a little bit more of a juicier contract. Who knows? But all the best to Matthew Perreault, and hopefully maybe he stays for a fourth line role next year on a really reduced salary. I could be happy with that. I think a lot of Jets fans would be happy with that. But nonetheless, I want to keep moving on towards our next stats that we're going to be talking about, and that is kind of our record against the North Division today. So the North Division in 56 games played, as you can see. I'm not going to go too in-depth about it because we've already talked about it a lot. Edmonton was the team that gave us the most trouble this year. The team we had the most success against were obviously the Habs, the Senators, and the Canucks. So other than that, the Leafs we kept pretty close at times, I like to say. And at Calgary, I think as well, it was kind of a good pattern we had with them, but we're able to dominate most of the time. But the only real team that gave us trouble this year, which is a team I've covered a lot recently because we're going to be getting to know them a lot better, is the Edmonton Oilers, because the Edmonton Oilers really had our number. They were 7-2 against us this year. They outscored us in every way possible. McDavid killed us. He had 27 points in 9 games, so he was just absolutely ridiculous, and it was just something that was a hard matchup for the Jets to be able to overcome, especially once you were able to get past that second win that they had against Edmonton. They really just went off and they weren't able to get anything back. Edmonton really dominated us and were the team that really exposed a lot of our weaker problems. But nonetheless, I still think that with all this being said, it was interesting to kind of see what teams we were able to succeed against at times, which we weren't. Kind of obvious which ones we had success about, especially when you look at Ottawa and the Canucks, who are obviously the worst teams in the North Division this year. Sorry, Canucks fans. Sorry, Sens fans. It's just the truth, and you know it. But that doesn't mean that wasn't a good times against Montreal as well. But you have to remember, we also had some bad losses to Montreal as well in there as well. So it's an interesting kind of balance this year we had. But obviously, the one team that really gave us trouble this year in the North, every other team we were able to compete with for most of the time and dominate, obviously, other than the Oilers, and that was the only team that gave us trouble. So that's kind of what I just wanted to touch on briefly, and because I've already shared all my thoughts about this in every game recap. I felt like we've matched up at times pretty well against all the other North Division teams that are kind of the mediocre ones, like the Habs, Ottawa, Calgary, and whatnot, and the Canucks being the Canucks. But when it came to the Oilers and even the Leafs at times, we weren't able to be as consistent. The Leafs we matched up better against for some weird reason, but the Oilers just always had our number. So I don't know if that's going to change. Hopefully it will for the playoffs, but, wait and see. Now, the next thing I quickly want to just cover about the season, that's something I've touched on at times, is our players that have been horribly defensively and how our horrible defensive issues have just kind of stemmed from bad defensive play and from certain individuals especially. And I kind of just want to talk about this. Josh Morrissey obviously being the third worst defenseman in the NHL, basically, for even strength defensive wins above replacement. Just not a good year for him defensively. Again, probably one of the worst years we've seen from him in a long time. He had improvement and game stretches where he looked a lot better, but nonetheless, he just still struggled a ton, and this was just not his year. He needs someone stable to play with him. Tucker Pullman, Nathan Beaulieu, Jordy Ben, and they ain't cutting it anymore, so he needs a guy like Ville Heinola who knows what happens, but they need something to happen to stabilize there. I still think playing Neil Pionk with him and stacking that pairing might not be a bad idea with all these young guys and reshuffling the D, who knows, but I'm interested to see what happens with Morrissey with this team since he's signed for so long and what his future will look like. But until, the day comes where we have an idea of what our stable defense is going to look like, I feel really bad for the guy because he definitely needs some help back there, because Neil Pionk, is a great defenseman, but he's not a defensive guy that can really help stabilize the defensive core. He's a complementary piece, as I like to say, because he's a great two-way guy, but he's not going to be the face of a defensive core. He's not going to carry a defense either, and because of that, you have to, you need to find a way to balance and help defensively structure your core, your pairings better, excuse me. So I just wanted to talk about that, how he was there, and I also want to talk about our forwards who don't play defense as well. Blake Wheeler being the worst forward in the NHL for even strength defensive wins above replacement this season. He was god awful. As you saw earlier, I didn't touch upon the plus minus when I showed the top 10 in scoring, but Blake Wheeler had one of the worst plus minuses in the NHL. I know it's a weird stat we don't like to refer to at times, but it can still be accurate in certain situations, and I feel like in Blake Wheeler this year we definitely saw how accurate that was. So yeah, not a good year defensively for Blake Wheeler. I talked about that a lot, but the other interesting player on this list right now, if you've already noticed, is Kyle Connor. And Kyle Connor as well is like a guy who I've talked about a ton, who's a great finishing forward and a great goal scorer, but he cannot play defense. And it's a problem when you have two guys who play in the same line who don't play defense, and then Mark Scheifele, who is just basically up past Marcus Sorensen on basically just missing out on this list because he's not very good either. It's a big problem that they have with balancing their defense on that top six, because when you look at that top line of Wheeler, Scheifele, and Connor, it's good, you might think, for offense at times, but defensively it's invisible in their own end. So it's a big problem going into the playoffs where if you don't play defense and good, man coverage on the Oilers, or try to play man coverage on McDavid and slow him down, or zone, whatever you have to do to try to stop the guy, having two guys that are really bad and known bad throughout the league for being bad defensively isn't a good structure in my opinion. And that basically kind of rounds out my real thoughts that I had on the season and whatnot to begin with, because I don't want to go too in depth. Like I've said, I've shared all my thoughts throughout the game recap, so go back and watch those if you want at times. All the important games are the ones with the most views, so it's not hard to find, and they're all tagged with what games they were and whatnot, so you can find them and whatnot, and you can see more reactions then. But other than that, the season, to categorize my last kind of thoughts on everything, 1 is just disappointment, 2 mediocrity, and 3 kind of a reality check where we kind of finally saw as fans that this team ain't ready to compete. They have way too many holes, and there needs to be some structural changes with this club on how they play and the coaching and just their lines and whatnot before they can really reach that next level and ascend to being a cup contender again. Right now, they're maybe a second round competitive team, if that. I don't see them being anything more than that. They need to improve, and as a real fan, I see that now, and I want to see this team improve. They have all the means to do so. They still have a great team, but they need to tweak the roster to be able to come back to that form we saw in 2017-18. So until they are able to do those things and tweak it potentially in the offseason, who knows what the success we'll see against Edmonton going into the series start tomorrow. But with all that being said, let me know your thoughts on the series, all your thoughts on the season. Thank you guys so much for joining me this season and this journey I had, sharing you all my game reaction videos, all the game recaps, the videos we did, everything we talked about this regular season. Thank you guys so much. It was an amazing honor to make content for you guys. All the amazing I can't talk right now because you guys just blow my mind with all the support you show the channel. It's really awesome. It's something that I would never really expected. I never expected to see the type of comments, the interaction that we get on this channel. So thank you guys for making this community as great as it is for everyone to talk about the Winnipeg Jets and talk about hockey regardless of the teams that they root for. So with that being said, I'm going to end the video off here. Peace, love, and positivity as always. So make sure to subscribe and follow all my socials down in the description below. I will see you guys in the next video. Go Jets, go. Playoffs start tomorrow. Hope for the best. I will see you guys in tomorrow's live stream at starting at Puck Drop. So make sure you turn on notifications and stay tuned for that. All that being said, peace, love, and positivity. Like I said, bye-bye. Have a great day whenever you're watching this video, regardless of what time it is. Hope you're doing well. Talk to you in the next one. Bye-bye.